morning, everybody, and welcome to our Tech and Toast breakfast event. Really excited to be joined today by Nick Slack.
Hello.
On behalf of Built Environment Media. Today we're kind of taking a bit of it's a top-level look through artificial intelligence. We want to sort of find some of the ways that using sort of a case study like Built Environment Media, who through Nick here have recently implemented or in the process of implementing an AI solution, we thought it would be a really good idea to discuss some of the other cases as well of where AI could be used in your business. It's particularly because I think a lot of people don't necessarily realise that their company can benefit from it. And so we brought an expert along here today, which is Mr. Nick Slack here. So if you do have any questions at all for Nick while we're going through things today, please just pop them in the YouTube chat. I see Tim's there already. Good morning, Tim.
Good morning.
Thanks for joining us nice and early. If you have any questions, just pop them in the chat and I'll be sure to ask them on your behalf to Nicholas. So, Nicholas, would you like to introduce yourself in a little bit about sort of what you do and how you got involved with Built Environment Media?
Sure. So, as Chris has kindly introduced, my name's Nick. So I'm Built Environment Media's Chief Technical Consultant. I've been working with them about 2.5, 3 years, something around there. So I came from the University of Sussex. I did a degree in computer science there, and I went on to research at the University of Sussex for a few years. I did some research with AI, some without, and I moved out of that into running my own business, my own technical consultancy, where I helped a lot of local businesses here in Brighton and some universities in the States to do some AI work, and here we are. So I'm here to answer your questions, explain a bit about the project, and just generally hang out for half an hour, really.
Excellent. So I think the best place to start would be to look at what one of the projects you have already worked on, which would be this Built Environment Media project.
Sure.
So first, could you explain a little bit about what they do and their typical work, and then how the AI has assisted it?
So Built Environment Media has two main products. They have TenderStream, which is their primary product at the moment, which is they collect and process European tenders, American tenders for architectural work. So that's when the government needs to build a new hospital, they'll put out a tender. Architects and developers will bid for the tender, put in applications,
and it's internationally competitive.
Yeah, it's internationally competitive. So if the UK government puts out a tender, there's nothing stopping, say, a German development firm applying for that. They just need to have a base of operations in the UK. So TenderStream collects all of that data. They process it. They used to process it by hand, and I helped them automate that processing. And then the second offering is the new product they're launching, which is Developer Insight. So Developer Insight is their main AI-driven project that I've been working on with them. And what that does is it collects what we call pay data. Pay data could be a blog post, it could be a website, it could be a tweet, anything where an architect or a developer or central government has posted something about a piece of architecture. We collect all that up and we process it with AI, some natural language processing, to reduce it down to a nice bite-sized chunk of about 250 words. And then they'll sell that to architects, developers, anyone who wants to be involved in that. And the main purpose of the AI here is to generate a network so that you can say, oh, well, we'd like to know everything going on in Hammersmith. And you can search in Developer Insight for Hammersmith, and we'll give you a list of everything that's come up related to Hammersmith.
Brilliant. So yeah, it's not, in this case, it's not just augmenting an existing service, it's actually generating
it's a completely new service. So it's taking the information game one step forward. Mike likes to call it whiffs and sniffs, which is finding an idea of what's going to happen before it actually does. So let's take Hammersmith, for example. If Hammersmith Council starts murmuring that they want to build a new block of affordable housing, they might start getting some interest about that. They might start laying some hints. The point of Developer Insight is to find those hints, condense it down, process it, and give it to Developer Insight subscribers so that they know about it before the competition.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense, actually. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And then the other side, which was before this, you actually mentioned that you did a little bit of automation as well.
Yes, that's right.
And I wondered if that was where that crossed over, and if that was any
So
intelligent design, or
it was intelligent design. So what we did with TenderStream is beforehand they were getting maybe 500-600 tenders a day. Mike, sorry if that number's wrong. It's been a while since we did that project. And they would process these by hand. So Mike had a team of people across the world that were taking these tenders and filling out a form on their back end by hand, taking over the names, the contact numbers, the details, the value, all of that stuff by hand. And that's a really easily automatable job. So what we did together is we learned from how their employees were doing it. We took patterns, sets of best practice, a lot of employee insight, and we built kind of a hybrid expert system. And those of you that have worked in IT before might know what an expert system is, but for those of you that don't, an expert system is dumb tech. There's no AI, there's no neural networks, nothing like that. It's a set of patterns that experts have told you. The data looks like this. Mm-hmm. And they just program that in. Now, we took that and took it one step further and made it intelligent so that it could learn some new patterns. And that has seen a massive increase in efficiency. Again, Mike, correct me if I'm wrong on these numbers, but it was about an 80% efficiency increase in their processing time. So before our system was implemented, it took them around half an hour, 45 minutes per tender. With our system, it went to 2.5 minutes.
Okay, yeah.
So it's a huge time saver for them, and it's not a complicated algorithm, but it's a massive time saver for them. That saves them thousands of pounds, and
I think up front, these are some of the things that people tuning in might be more interested in.
Absolutely.
Like, I'm not saying they're easy wins, but they're relatively quick implementations that can have really huge effects across your business.
Absolutely, they're financial no-brainers. That's the kind of thing that AI is really good for, right? It's automation, and there are some applications of it where you go a bit further, where it's intelligent design, or you want to create a new service that doesn't exist before, like developer insight. But most of the time, AI is just something to speed up a process you've already got. Mm-hmm. So just to give those watching a quick overview, AI is not what you might think it is. Lots of people like to harp on about it being, the golden goose of technology. It's not. It's like any other tool in your toolbox. It's like any other wrench or screwdriver, to follow that analogy. It fixes a problem, right? And it fixes it really well. But you wouldn't use a screwdriver to put a nail in a fence. Or you would, and it would work, but it would take a long time, and you might hurt yourself. It's the same thing in business. AI solves a set of problems, but it doesn't fix everything. Mm-hmm. And that's the difference between someone who harps on about AI on LinkedIn and someone that actually builds the stuff. Because someone who harps on about it on LinkedIn will be, oh no, it fixes everything, it's fine. You've got to know where to use it.
So before we start looking at some of the examples and possible cases of people maybe sparking some ideas in chat as well, we did have a question from Tim, and it's actually relating to developer insights.
Yeah, of course.
It was actually saying, is there any data relating to the sentiment for the architectural project?
Yes.
I.e. whether people are saying a block of affordable flats were a good idea or a bad idea?
Yeah, we've included sentiment analysis in that, and that's part of our indicator for a given piece of data, is we skew it positive or negative. So it would be if Her Majesty's government said, we're going to spend £10 million on this new block of flats in Hammersmith, what we would do is we would gauge the sentiment of that as to whether people thought it was a good idea or a bad idea. Is it likely to come off? Is it unlikely to come off? And we'll gauge all of that as part of our processing. So yes, there is sentiment analysis.
Thank you very much for your question, Tim. If you do have any more questions as well in the chat, please do drop them in.
Shoot, absolutely. I'm happy to answer pretty much anything.
I think if anyone's ready to take pretty much any questions, this man here. So
yes.
it'll be...
You'll have difficulty shutting me up.
And you couldn't ask him to go get enough of an explanation as well. So, looking at sort of use cases, it seems to be that in the built environment media, there was definitely until the leads generation side came along with developer insights. It was a lot more about just sort of handling data entry and sort of monotonous tasks. What other sort of tasks along those lines are really? What sort of businesses have you seen that have just sort of maybe they've been doing these things the same way for so long, and suddenly they've realised we can just automate this now?
Yeah, so
easy wins. If they can think
yeah, easy wins. There's a lot of them, frankly. A lot of them are in finance tech, so fintech. Most of them are also data science related, but you'll see some in manufacturing or in design, let's say. So one of the biggest use cases I've seen for AI was in manufacturing design for cars. So this isn't particularly a local business example, but if you program your AI right, you can save hundreds of thousands of man hours on designing products or on designing, let's say, a car door or a bonnet for aerodynamics. That's a really good example. Other examples more locally, you could even look at things like restaurants. Restaurants could benefit from some medium of AI processing to figure out, what's the best kind of deal to give. Even a fish and chip shop could benefit from it, let's say. What meal combination in a fish and chip shop is selling best? What time of day is it selling at? Okay, well, let's put that data into an AI, find the pattern and go, okay, well, if we want to, have a sales target of 20% month on month, which is huge, let's feed the data we've got in and see what the AI would recommend. AIs can be used in advertising. It's really common in advertising. So Google Ads, for example, great application of AI for finding keywords that work on your Google Ads or for your website SEO. It's another great one. It really is a fairly good multi-tool.
I think one of the key parts that you need for any good project, though, is you're going to need a large amount of data to work with.
Yes, absolutely. And that really is the key with any kind of data science or any kind of processing, is the data itself is 80% of your project. An AI is only as good as the data you give it. So if you've got bad data, your AI is going to do badly. But if you've got lots of really good quality data, it's going to be great. And they're an investment. You have to invest time into growing an AI system.
Training it, teaching it.
Yeah, training it, teaching it. It's like a child. It really is. You've got to nurture it, give it good data, help it along the way, and then it will run a nice 100-meter sprint for you after a little bit of tender loving care.
So then the next question I'd have is, if someone has identified a potential example, of course, if you're in the chat, please feel free to drop us a message about what you do as a business, and maybe that might spark some ideas, and we can sort of help suggest some potential projects. But if you have identified something, what's sort of the first step into breaking down the problem?
The first step into breaking it down is really talk to the people doing the work, right? And if you're in management or you're running the company, and you think, okay, well, what are your blockers in the company? You might have found a problem. Let's say, taking built environment media as example, they were spending too much time putting data entry in, right? It's find the blocker, talk to the people that normally do that work, and see what their biggest time consumer is. Once you've found that, try and find the pattern. Right? And there might be an obvious pattern. There might be a more subtle pattern. Once you've got that, it's then take that information, put it all into a nice document or, I don't know, a folder on Google Drive, wherever. Make a little report on it. Doesn't need to be long, but write something down, something tangible, and take it to someone who does AI or technical consultancy, someone like me or whatever, and they'll normally talk to you for free for a couple of hours and tell you whether you can do it or you can't do it. Or they'll suggest a way that you can improve it.
I imagine there's a lot of people in that position, or in your position, who are sort of waiting for these people to come forward.
Oh yeah, there's loads of us, especially in Brighton. Lots of technical consultants will happily talk to you about a problem, let's say, Most of them will do sort of an hour or two's consultancy for free, and there's nothing wrong with just finding someone on Indeed or LinkedIn or whatever, sending them a message and saying, hey, I think I've got a problem, or rather, I have a problem. Would you mind having a look at it? And if they're good at what they do or they have a lot of experience, it normally only takes someone about half an hour over a cup of coffee to sit down with you and figure out whether you can solve this problem with AI or any kind of processing technology, or whether you need something else.
Mm-hmm. And so we actually have a question in, because you tantalisingly mentioned Fintech as an area.
Yes, I did.
And we had Chris Hollins has wrote in saying, currently product designer in a Fintech startup. Would love some more examples of uses in that sector. And I wonder, any come to mind off the top of your head?
So, yes, actually. I mean, I don't know.
Hopefully without putting off the rest of the
No, I won't. I'll keep it light. So I have a little bit of experience with Fintech. I did talk to a couple of product managers at JP Morgan. I think it's JP Morgan. I chatted to them for a while. And a lot of AI in Fintech is mainly market trend watching, stock trading algorithms, right? But there's more to it than that. There's a lot of interest at the moment going on in index funds. I know Warren Buffett waxes lyrical about them sometimes, but lots of people are chasing index fund AIs. They're chasing particularly cryptocurrency-based AIs, any kind of way you can predict how the chain's going to move. It's mostly statistical analysis and market indicators. But the most interesting one I saw was an AI that was trying to predict price changes post-COVID. That was a really interesting one. Because as you can imagine, COVID's completely wrecked the economy for the last 6 months, if not longer. It's been a really fascinating one watching how that project's going. But there's a lot of potential use cases for financial products there, or for investment strategy advice, or anything like that. An AI is a great fit for Fintech because it's all pattern-based.
Huge amounts of data.
Yeah, it's massive amounts of data. You've got per second data from the stock market for every company on the planet. So, AIs love that stuff.
Yeah. So a couple more questions. Actually, I'm gonna move to carry on with Chris Holland's question. He added a follow-up.
Yeah, of course.
Also, do you have any opinions on automation frameworks such as Auto?
Ooh, Auto.
This is suddenly going a little bit.
That's suddenly going a bit too fintech, but I'll answer this one. But I don't want to go too much deeper into fintech. Auto's okay. It's C++ based at the back end, which is all right. It performs okay. It's a bit old hat, to be honest. Most of the big fintech stuff on the inside ends up using TensorFlow, which is Google's AI framework. A lot of these fintech AI platforms or online, stock algorithms, the browser-based ones are quite old now. And to be honest, I would not advise using them. If you're gonna do AI for fintech seriously, your best bet is to do it yourself. Because the thing is, the people that run those platforms make their money off people thinking, oh yes, I'll make a great AI, and then it doesn't, but they make their money on the market spread from the trades. So they don't care whether your AI works or not, they just want your AI to trade lots. So...
another question. This is great, the questions coming in.
They're fabulous, I love it.
This man is really good to be quizzed on the spot as well, because I love seeing him just be able to pull the answer out as well. I had a question from Dave R, which says, I've developed an app which uses existing weather data and users input their panes/flare conditions to see if there is an effect. How do I avoid false negatives/positives so I don't feed back the wrong information to the user?
Ooh, that's a good one. But that's starting to get a bit technical.
Okay, you might need a moment to come back to that one.
Yeah, that I would love to have a conversation with you about that, totally, because that is a recall problem normally. False positives and false negatives are always difficult. It's about setting your thresholds, and this is where you start getting into needing multi-layered networks. So you'd have...
Start from
start from the beginning. So you can have an AI that looks for a pattern in your data, right? That's your first layer. Then typically, if you're really serious about what you're doing and you've got lots of budget and processing power, you'd have a watchdog AI as your second layer that would then look for a pattern in the errors in the first one. That starts getting a bit more complicated. But what I would do in that case, if you're noticing a lot of false positives and false negatives, is there's going to be a pattern somewhere. So I would run a simpler neural network or some kind of SVN. It doesn't even need to be an intelligent system. But take all the data points that you're identifying, run them through that and see if there's a pattern. That's what I would do in that case, just to start with. And Dave, if you want more on that, I'm happy to chat more about it offline, but I don't want to take up too much of anybody else's time.
I was going to save it till the end about asking how people can get in touch, but since this is the point, what's the best way if someone wants to sort of contact you?
So me specifically, email or phone, I'm more than happy to pick up the phone and chat to someone, go out for a cup of coffee, whatever. I mean,
COVID-safe coffee.
COVID-safe coffee. COVID-safe coffee. 2 meters apart, everyone.
More virtual.
More virtual. But I'm more than happy to talk to people and give some advice.
Okay. So maybe I can pop your email just in the follow-up.
Yeah, absolutely. Feel free to pop my contact details in the follow-up, and I will try to answer as many people as I can.
Excellent, because I think
there's going to be a lot of questions.
There's going to be a lot of case-by-case.
There's going to be some case-by-case stuff, and I'm more than happy to talk to people.
So, more on going back to sort of a general viewpoint, and this might maybe we look at the built environment media examples. Is about sort of cost and time scale, because I was thinking about the investment and the overheads, and obviously it's going to vary. It's going to be
it's how long is a piece of string, really. The problem with budgeting for any technical project, let alone an AI project, is you have to be realistic and understand that everything that can go wrong will go wrong. There's no way of avoiding that, right? And it will be things you're not expecting. So, for example, with the built environment media project, the AI has actually gone smoothly, but it's been the hosting that's gone wrong. You would never have expected that. The hosting is one of the things that you think, man, this is simple, this would never go wrong, and it went wrong. So you have to understand that these projects do take time, they do take money, they take an investment of man-hours and expertise, but they do pay off. You have to look at them as a medium-term investment, so 3 to 5 years normally. It's not, unless it's a very specific use case, like say TenderStream, where it was we're automating data input, we can see returns immediate. 3 months, immediate. Where cost overheads have gone down versus the overhead of the hosting. Job done, nice, easy savings. But for anything more complicated than that, you're looking at 2, 3, 5 year return periods. So unless you are investing in a project or a platform for a long period of time, AI may not be your best choice, but some sort of what I like to call dumb processing or normal programmatic processing could give you a better return in the short term. So it really is about what fits best for your business, what's going to look best on your term sheet, how are your stakeholders or investors or your board going to look at it. Sorry, I'm going a bit more business consultant here. I do that too. But it really is about what's going to provide the most utility for your business in the short to medium term. And if you've got deadlines to meet, AI may not be the best solution. And at least in the short term, it might not be. In the long term, sure. But a typical freelance programmer, let's say, in the Brighton area, can charge anywhere between $300 and $600 a day. And an AI project, you're normally looking at 4 to 6 weeks, if not longer, for production time. So you could easily be looking at £10,000, £20,000 at that kind of thing. But fear not, even though that is a high price point, there are lots of ways you can offset that. So there's government R&D tax credits, which will count if you're paying subcontractors fees or payroll fees. Those can all count as R&D tax credits. You've got a variety of grants running at the moment that will do percentage-based match funding for capital expenditure. There's Google, Amazon, Microsoft will all provide you with free credits for hosting. There's loads of different ways that you can bring that cost down in the short term. But these are expensive projects, and they are going to take a while to bring back the money unless you are doing a very particular use case. And again, I stress, is how long is a piece of string, and how much shoveling do you want to do right now, unfortunately.
So, looking at the other end, there's still sort of coming out of lockdown now, but there's still a lot of people that are looking and using this time, maybe they're furloughed on a break, or they haven't got work at the moment, and they're looking at ways to sort of improve and find new skills and develop. So there could be someone tuning in who's got some programming experience but wants to look at AI as an area. So talking from that perspective, what's a good way to get into it? And actually, I know there's obviously a huge amount of academic learning required, but if you wanted to start to learn more about it yourself, and that might be why it's driven some people today.
Absolutely.
What's the best way forward? Where would you start?
So let me get one thing straight. You don't have to be an academic to do AI, right? There's using AI and there's understanding AI, right? And those are two different things. If you're just going to use AI for your business, you don't necessarily have to understand it. And that sounds weird at first, right? That if you were using a manufacturing machine like a CNC machine, you need to understand it to use it. Pardon me. AI isn't like that, right? You can learn how to use an AI very quickly. If you've got a decent head for maths, and I'm not talking university maths, if you've got a decent head for maths, you did well at GCSE or A-level, or you used a lot in your job, you'll be fine. Right? And even if you aren't, Khan Academy, which I'm sure some of you will have heard of, do great stuff on maths. I would highly recommend, if you're interested in getting better at maths, Khan Academy, very good choice. They're free, which is great. But to actually learn AI, Google's machine learning course is pretty much the de facto standard for getting into it. And that's completely free. It's all online. They do videos explaining everything. They've got live examples, programming examples. It's all written in Python, which is a very easy language to learn. Not that programming itself is easy, but in terms of difficulty, Python's at the lower end, which is fine. That would be where I would start if I was coming in fresh. After that point, you can then start looking towards the cloud platforms. So Google Cloud, GCP, Microsoft Azure, Amazon Web Services. They all then provide training courses for AI for their specific platform, obviously, but a lot of the lessons are pretty much the same. There's loads of online resources. My general advice would be to stick to Google-based resources or anything using TensorFlow, because that is the de facto industry standard, because Google has lots of money to throw around and they've thrown it all at AI.
It's a name that seems to spread as fast as the word AI almost.
Yes, Google and TensorFlow are pretty synonymous with it at this point, but that's because Google has thrown an ungodly amount of money at it and pretty much taken over the market segment on that. That would be my recommendation. To use AI, you just need to understand some sort of GCSE A-level maths. To understand AI, however, that's where you're starting to look at degree-level mathematics, postgraduate mathematics, and equations look nasty, frankly. Someone like me needs to understand it because, we're programming it at a very low level, and I do understand it. But people in your position that just want to use it for a quick business win don't need to understand the mathematics behind it. You don't need to understand n-dimensional matrices. That's my job. That's not your job.
You made that word up.
No, I didn't. N-dimensional matrices are not fun. But and even then, there are bits of it that I don't need to know that someone in an academic position does. So it's keep it simple, apply it, try it out. You can do Google's machine learning course an hour a day for 2 weeks, and you'll have finished it.
So here's another question for you, because I've actually got through all of my sort of pre-prepared ones. So
okay,
a little bit ad lib now.
Ad hoc it.
So
Let's
any questions in chat, please do drop them in. Give me,
absolutely.
We've got a good sort of 10-15 minutes more of Nick's time here, so any questions he'll be happy to answer. One of the things that I was interested in recently is Nvidia announced their new graphics card series.
Yes, their 3000 series.
The 3000 series, which is getting like crazy performance, and it's very exciting for what the future
of computer
graphics and everything will entail. one of their big focuses was on their new AI chips and all the sort of new hardware, all revolving around AI and machine learning. Where does that sort of mix in? And like, is that hardware going to be valuable to people, or does this go against using a TensorFlow approach and doing things in the cloud?
No. So the purpose of those hardware bits is for academics, right? Let's be clear about this. For people like you guys who are watching that do AI, unless you are programming the AI yourself on your own machines, you do not need a piece of Nvidia hardware. It is a waste of your capital, right? I mean, if you play games, that's another matter, because they're really good graphics. They're definitely worth it. They're great graphics cards. But the Nvidia cards, the new 3000 series, they're built for either academics that have workbench machines that need to run AIs, or they're built for servers. So someone like Google or Amazon will buy 100 or 1,000 of those cards, shove them in their server stack somewhere, and then when you use AI through Google Cloud, let's say, you'll be using one of those. So it's a really exciting prospect, business to business, for enterprise level. But unless you, watching, are running your own AI-hosted server stack somewhere in a basement, it's not worth your money.
So for people out there, that also does insinuate you don't need to have a huge amount of like computing resources or server infrastructure and networking.
Nothing at all.
This is all cloud-based in like
it's all cloud-based. So you could, if you were really motivated, you could program AIs on your phone. If you were really motivated and could be bothered to type it all out on your phone, and deal with the autocorrect. But all of this stuff is cloud-based. You don't need big hardware to run it. You just need a decent piece of laptop machinery or normal office equipment. Anything that can run Google Chrome or Firefox reasonably well will run this stuff fine.
So again, another sort of, this might almost be a sort of running off point as sort of the last sort of questions. This is actually more of a fun one.
Okay.
One of the things that you hear about AIs is you sort of described it as like a child.
Yeah.
If you give it the bad information or bad upbringing, it sometimes does things the wrong way.
Yes.
Have you got any examples of AIs that do exactly what they've been told to do?
There's so many of them.
Don't. And I just think some of these are it makes you think about the way that an AI thinks.
Yeah. So there was a really good example a couple of years ago, actually. It was Taylor AI. I don't know if anybody here knows that, but it was, I think it was Microsoft's Twitter chatbot, and it would learn based on the content of Twitter conversations. And after about 2 months of running, it turned into a neo-Nazi that was posting pictures of Hitler on Twitter, and they had to take it down. But it was only doing what it was told. It was following the patterns of learn from the pictures people send to me on Twitter and learn based on the contents of the comments. But the internet, being the internet, started spamming it with tweets about neo-Nazism and racism and all that, and it turned into a racist homophobe AI in about 2 months.
And it got shut down.
And it got shut down very quickly after that. But that's an example of an AI going rogue, right? It's following its programming, it's learning the patterns, but people were deliberately feeding it bad data to make it do something funny, which wasn't all that funny, but it was a very good example of that. Now, a more creepy example for you, because you've got to have a bit of creep when it comes to AI. So there's one example from 2018. It was from a Japanese university whose name escapes me. They published a research paper where they had those adorable little robots, the Japanese walking robots. I'm sure you know that. Not terribly descriptive, I'm sorry. My coffee is starting to fail me. But they asked these robots a bunch of questions, and they asked a variety of questions to try and gauge, was the AI working? And one of the 2 or 3 robots they were testing, for a very brief moment, it asked the question, why am I here? And then it overheated and shut down. And they've never been able to reproduce that result, but they speculate in the conclusion of the paper that neural network they were running in there gained sentience for about half a second before it overheated. And they've never been able to repeat that with the same program.
If that's true, it's very exciting.
It's bananas, absolutely nuts. But it's never been replicated anywhere, in any other university, in any other neural network, ever. But it was recorded once, so it could happen again. We have no idea.
And this is where you don't want that AI to be fed on bad data.
Exactly. You don't want that AI fed on bad data.
All right, we're going to move away from Skynet. We weren't going to mention
that. Let's move away from Skynet.
I have a question actually in from someone asking, I'm a junior analyst and want to make a baby step on AI. So this was sort of what we were looking
Baby step. Baby steps are good.
Could you give me a recommendation on a habit or discipline I need to conduct to learn bit by bit before I can be pretty sure I can learn further?
Half an hour a day. Or an hour a day if you're feeling more dedicated.
Ambitious.
Ambitious, yeah, ambitious is a better word. Half an hour a day. That's really all it takes. You've just got to set aside half an hour where you're not looking at your phone, you're not looking at your emails, and you just take notes. That is, for anyone aspiring to learn programming, and I did teach programming for a while, I was a lecturer at Sussex for a little bit, the number one recommendation I can give you, write things down on paper. And that sounds bizarre, right? It's a digital career. Why would you write things down? It's all about learning. And the easiest way to remember something, unless you have a particular learning style like being visually driven or whatever, write things down. Now, ask yourself questions on paper in that half an hour you spend today. Come back to them tomorrow, see if you can answer them. And it's very important that you write things down in your own words, not just copying what's on the screen. So, pardon me. That would be my recommendation. Half an hour a day. Start with Google's AI course and go down rabbit holes yourself. If you find something that interests you and motivates you, pursue it. And take note of the things you don't understand. Make a list. When I was learning this stuff for the first time many years ago, my student dorms were a mess. I had paper blue tacked all over my walls. I had whiteboards. I'm sure Chris can talk about the number of whiteboards I had when I was in the Fusebox. I had about 6 of them, double-sided, covered in scrawlings. Don't be afraid to just write things down and go for it. And you have to understand it yourself. This isn't a race. You're not competing against anyone. Take your time, do it your way, and build that confidence up step by step. Start by programming, a battleship's AI, or I would say Go, but don't do Go. Go is very complicated. Or chess. And if it sucks and it loses, that's fine. The point is you've learned something. So you've got to start step by step, reflect on yourself every day, and just keep at it.
I'm no expert, but the bits where I went down a little bit of a tangent and started to pick up some of the bits and pieces was actually all through the Unity's implementation.
Yeah, Unity's got a really good implementation for AI. It's a bit limited. Yeah. It doesn't do everything, but it's another good place to start if you're more down that side of things.
If you see things in 3D, or want to see work in 3D like I do, that was...
Yeah, if you're visually driven, Unity might be a good place to start.
Before we finally do wrap up, again, any questions, please drop them in the chat. Still listening out for anything. We had, before we started, we had a little bit of a chat, and you mentioned about some textiles.
Yes, so
that's another good case study.
Yeah, that's another good case study. So that's from one of my personal endeavors, which is my wife and I, we do textiles and DIY materials and stuff like that. And I've written, as a little side project, an AI that designs fabrics. So what it does, I feed it a mood board, effectively, of like 10 or 20 different pictures of fabrics. I feed it to it and I say, right, make me a fabric that's something like that. And what it will do is it will produce the fabric. It will then create that design using Substance, which is a piece of Adobe software that any 3D modelers in the chat might be familiar with. Substance is written in Python, so I just plugged all of that into the AI, which is written in TensorFlow, which is also Python. Plug that into Photoshop through a plugin, then it exports it as a Photoshop file and exports it down a USB cable into a fabric printer and then prints the design. And if we like it, it prints more. And if we don't like it, I hit the reset button on the AI and say, that sucked, make it again.
Try again. Yeah, I think this is why I think actually also being able to, we were really set out to look at use cases for businesses to get involved, but also from seeing that there's individuals here that are interested in learning as well. I do think that once you master the sort of skills of implementing these AIs, you suddenly everything becomes like a toy box of things that you can automate.
It is. AI is like having the world's fanciest Swiss Army knife. It doesn't do everything, but it can give it a damn good shot.
It takes a while to find the right tool.
Yeah, it takes a while to find the right tool, and you've got to play around with it. But
Stick with this analogy.
I mean, just a couple of weeks ago, I programmed a very simple neural network into an Excel spreadsheet as a script to fix a profit margin for something. So I needed to make sure that the profit margin of an item was fixed at 20%. Right. So I fed in, web links that would pull in the raw material costs. It would feed in the average labor times. It would take average salaries from government census data, plug all that in, wrote a little neural network in an Excel spreadsheet, and then it automatically then updates the price on the website based on all of that data in real time from the neural network in the Excel spreadsheet. Look, I over-engineered it, and it was a complete, over-engineer, but it was really interesting to do, and I never thought I'd be able to program a neural network in Excel. Just
there you go.
There we are. It happened by mistake somehow, but it worked. And it's really fascinating to see the prices update in real time based on raw material costs. And during COVID, that was really important because, for example, everyone having screens in shops, the price of acrylic sheeting tripled in 2 weeks. Because there were no imports, everyone was stockpiling it, and they were price gouging, which is dirty and horrible, and I don't like it. But it had a real impact on the supply chain. So having a website that could responsively price things based on that was really interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, that was one of the things. Is we sort of skirt around the idea of COVID and things, but when you have a lot of AIs around the world that are all designed to be modelled on consistent data, how do they deal with
something like COVID throwing a spanner in the works?
Yeah, so unexpected. Did that have a big effect? Like those of AIs just not ready to handle
No, a lot of them handled it pretty well. So the thing about AI is it adapts. And its adaptation period depends on its programming, but it's normally about 500,000 samples. Now, it depends how often you're taking those samples. If you're taking those samples by the second, like in Fintech, it can adapt in a couple of days. If you're taking those samples once a day or once a week, it might never adapt to something like COVID. So AIs that were built well adapted COVID fantastically. AIs that were built badly kind of just averaged over COVID and didn't realize it was there. So again, that comes down to design. And some of them might have been built that way. Like, again, sorry to use the Fintech example, but an index fund has a return period of 5 years and an averaging period of 6 months. So it will only now just be picking up that COVID's happened because COVID's lasted for 6 months. Anything smaller than that is a blip in the data and it ignores it, which is important for index funds because they're over a 10-year period or a 5-year period. If COVID lasts for 2 or 3 years, then an AI managing an index fund will adapt to it, and start predicting on it. But if it's smaller than the sample size, it ignores it.
Okay, that makes sense. I think with that,
yes,
I think we've just about reached our deadline. I don't want to keep everyone here too much longer because it's an early morning. Thank you ever so much for joining us.
No, I'm happy to be here, honestly.
It's been an early start for you to get here into the studio as well, so thank you. I imagine you're used to doing most of these interviews virtually. So it's
some of them,
nice,
but I still have to traipse my sorry behind into London every now and again for a 8:30 meeting, and those suck, especially with the trains at the moment.
Not too bad, then.
No, but it's been an absolute pleasure to be here, and anyone who is listening or watching, thank you for joining us. I've really enjoyed answering your questions, and if you do have anything more specific, I'm around the Fusebox every now and again. I can come and meet people for coffee. I'm more than happy just to talk to people, though I am a little bit busy at the moment. I've got 2 or 3 companies I'm working with right now, so I'm a bit at capacity, but I'm more than happy to chat to people.
There's always be more projects down the line.
There's always more projects down the line, and I do teach people as well. So if people want to learn, I'm more than happy. Maybe if there's enough interest, I could do something here in the Fusebox. I don't really mind. Yeah, we'll see how it goes.
And yes, I just saw Julie's message. Yes, so thank you. I hope the case studies provided enough variety of sort of options. They were very specific to particular people, but hopefully also to those people that was really useful as well to get sort of a little bit of Nick's time on that. Just so you know what we've got coming up, this is actually the first in a series of events that we're going to be running in the mornings. The idea is that we want to look at different technologies that, much like AI, quite misunderstood in many ways. A lot of people are scared or unsure what they can do with the technology. And we're going to be going even more unused, I suppose. We're going to start looking at some of the more, further down the line technologies, like quantum computing is potentially going to be an area of interest.
You should bring me back for that one.
Bring you back for that, yeah.
Bring me back for that one.
At least you could be standing behind the camera asking, prompting.
Yeah, I mean,
quantum connections.
AI isn't all I do. I do a lot of things.
So that might be of interest as well. But yeah, we're going to be doing a load of different events around that, Internet of Things, looking at immersive, of course. We have our regular immersive meetups as well. So do watch the space and keep an eye out for our live streams, because we'll be bringing back plenty more content to the wide Sussex community. Thank you very much, everyone.
Yes, thank you for joining us, and thank you for asking such thought-provoking questions.
Have a lovely day.
Bye, everyone.